Hey there, this is Andrew Morrison doing my end course video reflection. I've really enjoyed this class. I kind of took this one and then our principles of leadership kind of back to back. So seeing how the two feed off of each other has been huge. I think in principles of leadership, there's been a few key things that I've learned. First and foremost is the need for continuous learning. I think it's very easy for us as leaders, especially in ministry, to always be learning on the Bible, right? Hermeneutics, apologetics, correct interpretations, etc. And by no means am I disvaluing like that. I think that's a huge value. But one thing that this class has kind of pointed out is the value of educating myself on always becoming a better leader. With my calling specifically and what I want to be as a currently I'm a youth pastor and I'm starting to put together the plans for a church plant. This class has really showed the need for me to continue to learn. Bill Allison in the book, talked about the importance of us growing continuously. So that's growing spiritually, as well, and just like mentally as well, as like how to be a leader, how to build a team effectively, how to lead that team. And really taking those courses of, whether it's podcasts, I was able to find some awesome podcast with Craig Grosselman leadership podcast and a few others that have just been very, very powerful podcasts to continue to learn and educate myself to become a better leader. And then just the desire to read more books on leadership. I don't think I realized how many books there were on leadership, especially Christian leadership as a whole. But these last two classes have really shown me several books that I want to continue to read more on so that I can become a better leader. I think the need for us as leaders to continue to grow is important just because our culture is changing. How people respond to getting led is different. And the way that you might lead someone, 5 years ago has changed to even today. And so knowing how to lead those people effectively and to be a multiplier, as Wiseman book was always pointing out, and that's probably the next point, is that, I need to have the desire to be a multiplier. Leadership just doesn't end with me. When I die, my vision, my purpose is to be able to have other leaders who are taking over that spot. And so I need to exhort those guys up in becoming better leaders, and becoming leaders who feel equipped, leaders who feel the natural draw towards leadership and leading other people. I have a huge passion for discipleship. The discipleship of 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men, who will then be qualified to teach others. And this is always, for me, usually come back to the desire for us to be able to lead people towards Christ. And that's critical. But a maker of disciple makers is also going to be a leader, and equipping people to be leaders themselves. Right now I have the awesome privilege where a lot of the students who I've led to Christ and have seen them grow, they're now leaders in my youth group. And now I need to equip them on how to lead students and how to continue on that process of being a maker of disciple makers. So I've really enjoyed Allison and Garda's book, and in their continuous focus on discipleship. And I think between those two, between Allison's book and Wiseman book of, that multiplication ministry applied to leadership. And so equipping these people to be able to become better leaders. Something that I've shared throughout my course is that we've gone through spiritual abuse before, where leaders had abused their authority in their lives, and a lot of it came down to the fact that they just don't know how to lead. They don't know the proper way of leading. They've never been taught that. They've never been encouraged in that. And I think this is an area where the church can grow a lot, is not only teaching people how to be spiritual, and that's a critical aspect, but when you're in leadership, how to lead people properly, how to lead people towards a path of raising their hands in worship, of people of knowing how to use their gifts and talents and abilities, and setting goals and agendas and meetings and a lot of things that the world puts a good value on, but it seems like the church has drastically rejected that. And it's kind of honestly forgotten about it. And it's been a lot of what I've been able to know of how to run a better, effective meeting, how to really evaluate the ministry and what we're doing, taking a step back and being like, okay, yes, God's in charge, but man still needs to make a plan, right? God in the end will completely control that, but we still need to make a good plan for the direction of where that ministry is going to go. And people need to know they can trust me in that. People need to know that the direction of where we're trying to go, and they can come alongside that. That's one thing that that Wiseman's book was always talking about, is equipping other people. That's my role, is not just to lead and have other people holding my hands up, and I think that's part of what leaders will do, is that they will, do that. But I came out of a movement that always made a huge emphasis that, you as a leader, your only role is to support the pastor and only the pastor. So you're always holding his hands up, but it was never the pastor pouring into you. It was never the pastor equipping you on what that really looks like. And so I think that's a huge growth area for me personally, is how to equip these people to actually lead, to take charge, to take initiative, to dream big, to have vision, and using their intelligence. A lot of times there's this pressure that pastors will put on themselves, where it's up to them to only come up with the vision, it's up to them to only come up with the mission and how to get that accomplished, and then they just tell other people what to do. They direct it and say, I need you to do this here, I need you to do that here. And instead, what Wiseman's book had really kind of shown me is that it's more than that. What we need to do is we need to go in a direction of, where do you think you can help out? Hey, this is what I need. How do you think you can do that? How would you accomplish this? How would you run with this right now? And I think that's a critical aspect of leadership, is trusting people to lead, trusting people to run, with the task that you've given them, and then putting it back on them as well, that they have that ownership, that it falls on them to complete that task. This was a challenge for me, because a lot of times if a task isn't getting done, I kind of have this personality where I'm just going to take it over. I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to run with it. I've given them the task, but, a perfect example was, as we were going through these lessons, I had tasked a leader with, hey, I need you to get these, this event out, right? We need to get this event out to parents, get these words out. The event's in a couple weeks, and nothing had been done. And so, I just made the call. I said, okay, these are the events that we're going to do. This is the time. This is the location. And we threw it out on social media. And that hurt that leader a lot, because they were like, I thought you were going to be in charge of that. And I told him, I was like, well, it wasn't getting done and it needed to be due. But I didn't set that expectation with them, really. I didn't sit down and really lay out that expectation. I was like, hey, I need you to do this, and what the consequences were if it didn't get done. The youth ministry would have survived if that event didn't happen, or if that event would have been put together. But the leader would have grown tremendously if I would have, number one, set the expectation right, and then number two, allowed them, if they didn't meet that expectation, to know what that looks like to fall, to feel that pressure of completing the task, and watching them live up to that, watching them run with that task of completing it, and feeling the reward of it as well. And it's me supporting them in both aspects. I think a very practical thing that we learned in this class as well, that constantly came back to, was creating your SMART goals. And I think the business world has almost bored me of that, right? Like, they're always like, oh, what are the SMART goals? What are the SMART goals? What are the SMART goals? And I think I've gotten very bored of that, and that I haven't even decided to put that into ministry. But when we've been laying out our SMART goals for ourselves as leaders and our ministry that we're running right now, and practical things that we can improve on, making it very small SMART goals, right? For instance, like the last paper that we wrote was, or the last discussion board was around my inability, or my area of growth of, equipping those leaders to run with that task and letting them fall with it. And so putting together a SMART goal for something small, an area of small improvement right there, that I can definitely grow in, an area where we could really, to really have a measurable, 2 or 3 events that I'm going to task them with, and it's attainable, and it's timeable. It's something coming up very soon. It's something that we can measure and specific. And so, using the SMART terminology and using that SMART planning for something very simple and fine-tuning the ministry and fine-tuning the what we're going to be doing as a youth group, and not even necessarily so much as a large group anymore. I think one of the other great things that I've learned in this class was really week 5. Week 5 was a really cool one where we did a research paper using scholarly journals and finding problems within our area of leadership, for the current field that I'm in. And so as a church planter, seeing these areas of leadership, that a lot of times it's come down to that they're not feeling equipped for the ministry. They're not feeling equipped for the role of pastoral care, that there's burnout and why this is happening. And I think from this class, a lot of it has come down to that there's such an emphasis on biblical understanding, which again, I'll never that's a huge aspect. But I think we miss the other side of the wing of actually becoming leaders. We can look throughout Scripture, and this was a really powerful thing to do, to look at seeing how Paul led people, and Paul didn't just leave people behind, or Barnabas, who was an exhorter, saw the potential in Paul and raised him up, came alongside with him. Barnabas was not the most popular man, like in the Scriptures. Like, there's not a whole lot of people that actually know everything about this guy. But this guy came alongside, and as a multiplier, helped Paul when Paul was in total isolation. But he saw the opportunity in Paul and who Paul was, and he built him up. And then what did Paul do? Paul did the same thing with Timothy, Silas, and the multiple men that he raised up. And so I think we can see that principle of being a multiplier, of using other people's intelligence and understanding that, like, hey, I might be smart as an individual, but using collectively our team, we're much smarter. They have different perspective, they have different ideas, and they're good points to have. I don't need to be in control of everything. I don't need to have the answers for everything. I don't need to understand everything. There's other people who are much better at it. They're much smarter. And if we can come together as a team using all of our intelligence, everyone has a value. And I think that's what's helped my leadership with this youth group over previous youth groups, is that instead of having 2 or 3 leaders and then people shuffling out, I think we've seen that as a youth group as a whole, not just my youth group, but youth groups as a whole, that leaders don't feel used. And I think it's because so often it's pointed around one person and they feel like there's only one thing that person can do. But if we use everyone's collective abilities, their knowledge, and see them for their potential and who they are, it would help us greatly in equipping other leaders and them for the ministry itself. And right now I have, my leadership team is continuing to grow because I think people are enjoying, they're feeling useful. They're feeling like that they're being used by God, that their talents, their gifts, and their passions are all coming together, because I've been learning to just let go of that, letting go of having all control, letting go of having everything perfect. And of course, there's areas to still improve. And even apologizing that leader that I completely ran over was a huge area. I very well could have lost that leader if I didn't talk to that leader and explain, hey, I apologize, I shouldn't have done that. This is what I had expected of you, and resetting those expectations again. And I think that built that trust again. And I think that as a leadership team, as a leader myself, that's been a huge growing opportunity. Instead of coming focused on me and everyone just supporting me, that we all are going in one direction and we're supporting each other, using everyone's abilities and tasks, and being okay with them doing that. So it's been an awesome class. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Professor, for all that you've done. God bless.